Welcome back, guys, to another video, and this is going to be an interesting countdown that I'm doing for this. I'm doing a top 10 impacts of becoming a gamer, so let's go. Now, where do I even begin? I've been gaming for such a long time, and you guys know I do a video game memory segment on this channel where I talk about a certain game or certain system and kind of share my memories of how I got to know it. And this is going to be kind of a collection of all those things put together. I guess what I'm going to start with is number 10, which is going to be video game magazines. And I still have a couple of video game magazines. I don't have as many as I used to have, but I cannot stress how much this was such a big part of learning about new video games or finding out about new systems. This was, of course, pre-internet days. This is before we had NeoGAF, Kotaku, IGN, GameSpot, all those websites. Before we had that, we had video game magazines, and I can just remember running away from my mom in the grocery store and going to the book section and sitting there and reading all these magazines and just reading the articles, but also playing what was going to play out in my head, like trying to come up with those little squares of gameplay of what the game was going to be about. It was such a different era than it is today. And also, not only magazines, but comic books as well. You could pick up the newest issue of Spider-Man or Iron Man, and, in the middle of the comic, there would be an advertisement for a video game. Now, number 9 is video game kiosks. Now, there was a time when the new systems would come out. I believe this kind of died out not too long ago. You don't really see video game kiosks anymore. I mean, you might be able to see some still in Best Buy for PlayStation 4 or Xbox One or the Wii U, but back in the day when you had Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis all the way up to the PlayStation, you couldn't go into any sort of department store without going to the electronics section and seeing these different kiosks. And they were like a hybrid of home console and an arcade. It was so interesting, and to this day I still wish I could have one of those Game Boy kiosks that they came out with. I remember playing that in Toys R Us, and I had the Super Game Boy, but it just wasn't as cool as playing it on that kiosk. Now, of course, speaking of arcades, I can't talk about this countdown without talking about my love for the arcades, and this is going to be number 8. And, wow, video games were everywhere back then because they didn't really exactly know what kind of market that it fit into. I mean, you could go into a gas station, go into a movie theater, and they had some sort of arcade cabinet. And I remember spending weekends at the skating rink with my sister when every once in a while I'd go with her, and I wouldn't be skating, I would be playing arcade games. And some of my favorite ones would of course be the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles arcade game. I spent hours playing that in Chuck E. Cheese, or back then Showbiz Pizza. And then also the arcades introduced me to some great series, and it introduced me to the fighting genre, where I first played Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter II. And speaking of being introduced to different genres in gaming, number 7 is actually going to be about a game that's very important to me, and that is the first Dragon Warrior. Now, before I played Dragon Warrior, the only video games I knew were platformers or beat-em-ups, going from point A to point B in a video game. And when I first played this was my introduction to a role-playing game, a game that really immersed you into an environment of exploration, and it was such a different game for me. I was about 7 years old at the time, so it really helped with my reading skills because it was nothing but text. But I remember it took me almost a year to finally beat this game, and when I did, I was hooked, and I totally fell in love with the RPG genre. It's one of my favorite genres of all time when it comes to gaming. Now here's another interesting one right here. Number 6 is going to be video game soundtracks, and I can honestly say music has been a big part of my life since I was a real little kid. My first instrument I learned how to play was the piano, And growing up, loving music and starting to connect video games with music, I remember recording video game soundtracks on cassette and listening to it on my Walkman, you know, on road trips or on the way to school and stuff like that. And to this day, I still love video game soundtracks. Even though I play in a rock band, I still sit at my piano and will play some sort of familiar video game track or try to write my own, because that's always been a huge dream of mine, is to be a video game composer. When I was a kid, I remember they asked me, you know, what do you want to be when you grow up? I didn't say a doctor, I didn't say an astronaut. I wanted to develop music for video games. Number 5 is another very important aspect of gaming, especially in the early 90s, and that was video game rentals. Now, I talked about the arcades, I talked about the kiosks and magazines, but this was very, very important for me, because I think a lot of us can agree that when you're a kid, you just don't have a whole lot of money, and what better way to play the new releases than to spend a weekend renting a video game? I remember going into Blockbusters or mom and pop shops and just scouring through the libraries of games, so much so that I can still remember the stink eye I would get from my mom because she was just ready to go. And so many games I rented, and I've just added to my collection over the years just to kind of relive that nostalgia. And number 4 on this countdown is a video game system. And no, it's not the NES, it's not the Super NES, it's the Sony PlayStation of all things. And yeah, I grew up starting out with a Nintendo and starting out with the Atari as well, but the PlayStation opened up a new doorway that completely changed my mind on gaming. I mean, I mentioned this in an earlier video you guys can look at on my channel where I talk all about my PlayStation memories, but just looking back and jumping from cartridge to CD-ROMs and the graphical upgrades, the music, you know, I mentioned earlier about soundtracks, the music was so much better, and almost getting arcade perfect ports of fighting games I grew up with like Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat 3. The list can go on, but definitely number 4 is the Sony PlayStation. And number 3 is going to be becoming a collector. Now, I still don't really view myself as a video game collector. I just have had all these games I never really got rid of. But, you know, as I've gotten older, I have caught myself feeling that nostalgic bug and just going out and buying some games that I played when I was younger. I mean, honestly, all the games that I have in my collection are not just games that I look at as value or collectibles, but little pieces of memory. You know, I can put in a game for the Nintendo and feel like I'm going through a time warp when I was a kid, and that's really what drives me buying retro video games, and that's what really makes me enjoy it. So when it comes to collecting, it's all about what I want to play and what I enjoy, and wow, the list goes on. And number 2 on my countdown, it's not necessarily going to be a game or system, kiosk, magazine, or anything like that. It's going to be a little bit more personal, and that is YouTube. I started watching YouTube back in 2006, and like many others, I found a lot of different gaming channels, and it wasn't until like 6 years later that I got the courage and started a video game podcast and started my own YouTube channel. And what's most rewarding about having a YouTube channel is not the subscribers, it's not showing off what I got, but it's connecting with other people that share such a passion towards video games. I've found so many games in the last couple of years that I didn't even know about from watching other people's channels. And not to mention, I've met some great friends along the way, and some of them were people that I watched and idolized, and some of them are just people that I found through YouTube and Facebook group pages and what have you. And to this day, I think this was one of the best decisions I've made, because honestly, I don't even know where my life would be right now if it wasn't for people like you guys and just doing this. This is something I really, really enjoy. And number 1 on my little countdown is going to be a very important one, and that is my grandfather. Now, I talked about him in one of my past videos about what got you into gaming, and he's definitely the one that got me into all of this behind me. And wow, you know, he's been gaming, or he was gaming before I was even born. You know, if you guys look at this picture right here, this is him getting his Atari. that, you know, a couple of years later when I was born, I grew up, I was always around video games. And you guys can watch a earlier video where I go a little bit more in depth in this. And, you know, until his last days on Earth, you know, we always talked about video games. It was such a huge common interest. And, you know, big thanks to my grandpa, because if it wasn't for him, I probably wouldn't be into video games, or not as much as I am now, because I mean, he was the one that bought me all the cool shit that I couldn't afford. I mean, he was definitely very supportive, and he loved the YouTube channel as well. So anyway, guys, that's my top 10 on impacts that I've had in video games. And if you guys have any memories or things that impact you, leave a comment below and let me know. You guys can also make a video response and post it on the XS Gaming Podcast group page, which will be right here. You guys can just visit this link right there and post your videos. I would love to see them, and it's a pretty nice community that's starting to get started, and I would love for everyone to be a part of it. And also big props to Power Level Amy. Her channel's right here. You guys can check out her channel. I know I've plugged her quite a bit, but that's because she's a huge inspiration on what I do. She even helped make the intro that I have. So big props to her, because she helped recommend this idea for this video. And as always, guys, thanks for watching. Thanks for all the support, and thank you guys for subscribing. And as always, happy gaming.